We want to thank you for joining us on the Heights Baptist podcast. On this podcast, you'll be able to listen to sermons and episodes such as this in which we discuss practical ways to grow in your faith as a believer in Jesus. At Heights, our mission is to love and to lead all people to a new life with Christ. You can find out more about our church and how you can engage and plug into the life of Heights at heightschurch.org. I want to welcome you to episode number 5. My name is Lee, and I'm the lead pastor here at Heights, and I'm joined, as always, with our worship pastor, Pastor Matt Hogan. And in this episode, we're going to talk about how to worship the Lord even in a time in which we are having to stay socially distant from one another. And so, Matt, I appreciate you joining me again. And this is kind of a topic I know that's been on your heart and in your mind as a worship pastor, is how to help people, to continue to engage and growing in their faith in a period of time that's, we're having to stay socially distant, or in our case as a church, we've been back in person for several months now, but we know there's still a good portion of our membership that is still online, and so just how we can kind of do that. And I really appreciate you bringing that up, and so thanks for thinking about this topic today.
And it's my pleasure. It's one of the things that's always been near and dear to my heart as a worship leader is that corporate worship, when the body gathers on Sunday morning, worship is something that we do together, with other people.
Right.
You can listen to worship songs on Spotify, and you can listen to sermons in your car, and you can do a lot of the same things that we do at church by yourself, but there's something special about when we as the body of Christ can gather together. And that's been something that's really missing for a lot of our people right now.
Yeah.
It's at this point at Heights, most of our ministries are open and we're able to gather in person again. But we have a lot of folks who, because of health issues, or maybe because of things that are going on with family members, if they have vulnerable people in their family, or if you've some of our special needs families or families with special needs children, they're going to have to continue to worship at a distance for a while. And so it's important for us to think about how we can engage and be a part of the community while we're still social distancing.
Yeah, and I think, when all of this started back in March, we as a church back in March made the decision to go strictly online, like most churches did, throughout the country. And thankfully, we were already working on live streaming. And so we had a lot of the equipment and things, but, we had to jump in the deep end of the pool of how do we do this pretty much overnight and become an online church, and now we've transitioned back in person at the end of May, but we see the value still, I think, in online ministries and being able to connect to people online, not just because of social distancing, but being able to reach out in new ways. And so I think there's blessings in that, but I think there is tension in how do you gather from a distance, and I know there's probably a lot of theological topics we can get into here. We want to lend a little bit more today in the practical, because I think there are situations still now where there are people who, I know in our membership, we're like, yeah, we totally understand, like, you need to stay home in a way because, like you said, health issues. I would point to the in-person always being the ideal.
Right.
You think of like Hebrews 24 and 25, chapter 10, 24 and 25, where it says, "And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and to good works, not neglecting to meet together as in the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day of Christ drawing near." And so there is that portion of worship in time where we're worshiping together, where we are trying to encourage each other, we're trying to build up each other in the faith, we're trying to help each other love the Lord more, stirring that up, and so it's the not neglecting that part.
Right.
But there is that tension now. How do you do that at home?
Right.
If it's just your family unit or by yourself, So let's dive into some practical ways. I think that still can happen. So as a worship pastor, you have somebody at home watching. What's one of the first things you tell them? Here's how I'd say, stay involved.
Well, the first thing I always tell them is sing really loud, even if you're the only one at the house.
Let the neighbors hear it, man.
I mean, literally, like, I would encourage you. And I've talked to some folks back when we were all worshiping online.
Right.
Like, we talked about some of these things, like, are y'all really singing at home, or are you just more listening? And different people kind of approach that differently, because they're like, well, it feels kind of weird to sing along with my phone, or it feels weird to sing along with the TV. And so I certainly understand that. And then again, like, I actually, back in March and April, we saw like family groups meeting together, and we almost had like little cell house churches.
Right.
And that was cool. I mean, they were like standing up when it was time to stand up, and sitting down when it was time to sit down. And I thought that was really cool. But one of the things that I think is best is if you can stream the service live. If you can stream the service live, I think that's preferable than watching it later. Now, we make the services available later if you can't watch either at 9 or at 10:30. But if you are able to interact live, then you can say good morning to some people in the comments section. And there's a lot of fellowship that happens, in that Facebook comments section.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that was really fun and exciting about doing church online, even though we were all in our living rooms, was we were, being able to say hi to everybody and connect with people, and so that makes it a two-way experience, rather than if you go and watch later, which is fine. Like if you've got to work or whatever, if you need to watch later, that's fine. But that's more of a one-way where you're not really able to participate with other folks in real time. So watch live if you can, and if you can't, obviously, watch later.
Yeah, and I would agree on the singing part. I know that may be weird for some, but my family would attest that I sing a lot around the house, and I'm horrible. I'm horrible. But there's times where I get, a song in my mind, in my heart, like "How Great Thou Art," and I'm just walking around singing, and Sandra's sometimes like, "You're being too loud," like, "Stop singing, you're being too loud." But there is, I think, if you're able to watch it live, like you said, that's a way to join in with the one another in singing, even though you are social distant. I agree on the comments. Like even that, I mean, folks are still doing that really well now, because you can stream the service at 9 a.m. at 10:30 on the Heights Facebook page, Heights YouTube page. Facebook is a little more interactive in the comments, but I usually even I'm in the room, I'll jump on my phone while we're singing once or twice and say hi, or man, this is a great song, or let people know what the passage is going to be that morning, and it's always neat to see the good morning, how are you doing, or so I think that's a great way to kind of continue to stay engaged in that way. I want to just kind of put out too, to watch your church primarily. I think this has also brought up a lot of church shopping online.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not saying if you're watching a good church, I'm not saying that's bad, but we're seeing, and I think we've experienced some too, where there have been people who've watched us from other churches, and then some of our folks, I'll hear like, "Hey, I watched 4 churches on Sunday," and I'm not putting down watching other preachers online if they're good preachers,
right?
But to make sure you're primarily watching the church you're connected to stay connected to that church, and not kind of create that consumer mentality of, well, I like the music here, and I like the preaching here, and so I'm going to watch the music on this church, and then I'm going to watch the preaching over here, or vice versa. Just kind of stay engaged, with your church primarily.
Yeah.
So,
definitely.
What would be another way?
Well, one of the things that I struggled with when I was doing this at home with my kids was just trying to get them into church mode.
Yeah.
Normally we get up in the morning and we put on church clothes and we drive to a building and it's worship time. When we were all worshiping online, it was cartoons. It was like another Saturday morning.
Yeah.
And so now one of the things I enjoyed about the online only time was that I got to make breakfast for my family. And of
Right.
course, as somebody who's on staff at a church, that's not something I typically get to do on Sunday morning. And so
Yeah.
I would make breakfast for everybody. We'd eat breakfast, and then I'd fire up the laptop and get ready to do the stream. And then I would be like, all right, kids, everybody come on in. Everybody gets their Bible. Everybody gets their worksheet.
Yeah.
And so what I was trying to do is just sort of to build some good habits, to say, like, this isn't something that's just going to be on in the background
Right.
while we're doing whatever. Like, we're actually going to have church at home.
Yeah.
And I think even if you live alone, even if you're by yourself,
Yeah.
like, it's a good idea to kind of have a spot where you're saying, this is where I'm going to be
Yeah.
on Sunday morning or whatever time, but preferably Sunday morning if you can.
Yeah.
Be in a certain place and a certain time, be engaged. Don't just like have it on and go do something else.
Right.
But try and set aside that time to, again, focus yourself on the singing and the preaching of God's word, and also to participate in the comments section.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was thinking, like, even if you're here, most people sit in the same seats.
This is true.
Sit in the same seat at your house, But there is something to that, because we are creatures of habit,
Yes.
and going to church is a habit, and I know that doesn't sound super spiritual, but it is. It's a habit. It's a discipline. You have to discipline yourself to get up, to get ready, to come to a service. So in that mindset of, if I can't join in person, I need to build that discipline of joining online. And so to build that idea of, and I've heard some of our members do that, they're getting up and they're putting on their Sunday clothes, and even if it's just them by themselves, because it's that mindset of, I'm going to do this. I'm going to worship. I'm setting aside the time to be able to do it. I think that's a fantastic way, because there's times where there's areas in my office where I like to kneel and pray. Not because they're like the holy corner or anything. It's just, it helps me to get up from my chair where away from the laptop, go pray over here at home. There's areas where I like to read my Bible. And same thing, it's just a mind shift of, okay, I'm going to stop doing this and I'm going to start reading my Bible. And so I agree. I think that's great advice. You can be washing the dishes and watching church, but let the dishes wait, and get it good and engaged at home. And so talk about a little bit, let's get into kind of relationships. And we've mentioned the comments section, but what would be some other ways for people who are having to socially distant to still stay relationally connected to a church right now?
Right. Well, a lot of what we've talked about so far has been sort of the Sunday morning service, or
Right.
the Sunday morning live stream. Another crucial part of staying engaged to your church while you're socially distancing is your life group.
Yeah.
I have been really impressed with the efforts that a lot of our life groups have made in order to have an online presence.
Yeah.
We've got life groups that are meeting on Zoom.
Right.
We've got life groups that are doing Facebook Live. And that's just been very encouraging to me to see life group and life group leaders that say, you know what, this is important. It's important to us to have a digital outlet so that our people can still be involved
Yeah.
and engaged.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really, really important now more than ever.
Right.
Because if you're in a rhythm to go into church every Sunday, then you're going to automatically see a lot of people every Sunday. Now that you're socially distant, you're going to need to make that extra effort
Yeah.
to make those personal connections with the people in your life group.
Right.
So what I would say is, if your life group is doing an online option right now, if they're on Facebook or if they're on Zoom, then participate in that.
Yeah.
Because that's another really important part of the body gathering.
Right.
If you're part of a group that isn't doing that, I would suggest maybe talk to leadership about starting that or exploring options to do that, or possibly joining a group that's an online only group,
Yeah.
or that has an online option,
Yeah.
because it's just so important to be able to make those connections. We talked about not forsaking the gathering together. The Proverbs talks about iron sharpens iron.
Yeah.
the Christian life is not meant to be lived alone.
Right.
You know, it's something that we need to be in fellowship and community with other people.
Yeah.
And so right now, that might mean a Zoom call,
Right.
or it might mean watching and commenting on Facebook Live.
Yeah.
But take advantage of those opportunities and stay engaged with your life group.
Right. Yeah, and I would agree all with that. You know, calls, text, emails. I've heard some of our members, you know, who aren't able to come back on a Sunday, are like, you know, you can still come visit, but we're going to sit outside and, you know, kind of away from each other across the yard or something. And, you know, so just any little thing like that, I think, is so important, and it's an important step to take, because my concern over time, because we know once 2021 rolls around, all this just doesn't magically go away. We're going to still be dealing with this. Is my concern over time is there's just going to be people who go, you know, hey, online's good enough, you know, and I can just watch a church at my convenience, and I don't need to plug into the life of a church. And
Right.
and we've mentioned a couple of other passages where I think biblically that we would point people toward, no, there's more than just watching. You know, serving one another. I still think there's ways you can serve while you're quarantined or while you're kind of socially distanced. You know, the New Testament says there's 59 one another commands in the New Testament of love one another, pray for one another, serve one another. So what would be some ways you think of how people could serve if they say, hey, you know what, I can't be around big groups. How in the world am I going to serve somebody right now? What do you think?
I mean, a prayer is the one that comes to mind right off the top of my head.
Yeah.
The greatest prayer warrior in my life is my grandmother.
Right.
And obviously, living in the age of COVID-19, she's not getting out much right now. Another great prayer warrior is my mom. And my mom is very healthy, but she's still in that, you know, that vulnerable category.
Yeah.
And so my mom, really just because she's, you know, she's a person who will follow rules and procedures and guidelines, and
Yeah.
you know, this is what she's been instructed to do, and she's done her very best to follow that. So she's starting to get out now a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's been like 7 months.
Right.
But she's constantly, you know, how can I pray for you this week? What's going on? You know, I'm here with my Bible. You know, I'm going down my list of the people that I'm praying for. Other things I can think of, you know, there's ways that you can continue to support the ministry of your church and other organizations financially. You know, that's an important thing to keep in mind.
Yeah.
You know, is to continue to be a financial support to your local church and other organizations that you
Right.
might support.
Yeah. And I think those are great, and also maybe texting someone, writing a note, emailing. You know, we've talked about life groups, and so if you're not able to be with your life group in person, taking that initiative to still encourage someone, that's a way to serve. You know, if you see somebody you know online, you know, hey, drop a comment. We've talked about the comment sections in the you know, live streams, and that's more than just saying hello. I think on a Sunday morning, I think that's a way to encourage someone. You know, and I've seen some of our folks do that with guests, you know, which has been neat. Like someone pops up and says good morning, and then they're like, hey, good morning, you know, I don't know you, or something. They introduce themselves. Like that's a way to serve, you know, because that might be somebody who, like, well, I don't know who that person is, but wow, that's kind of neat that they're saying hello.
You're like an online greeter.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's something we wouldn't have thought about at the beginning of 2020 of a way to serve someone. But your mom's one who's faithful in doing that, you know, and I'm always like, oh, there she is, you know. That encourages me to see her presence.
You have become a part of the hospitality mission of Heights Baptist Church, and you haven't left your house.
Right.
Like that's kind of exciting when you think about it.
It is, because, you know, one thing I always tell people in suffering when they're going through a hard time, that when they show up to church and they sing and they worship, that their presence in suffering is encouraging someone else, because someone may know, hey, I know that person and they're going through this in their life, and man, they showed up to worship God today. And so I think we can put that into the online category and say, hey, here's this person who is having to stay socially distanced from health, but look at their faithfulness in the comments section. Look at their faithfulness in giving. Look at their faithfulness in texting someone or reaching out to someone. And I know it's a click of a button, but the share button, I mean, that's the easiest way to invite people to church right now is just go share. Yep. And then it goes out to all your Facebook friends, and you just don't know who's going to watch it now. I mean, between your mom and my mom, we've gone multi-state.
That's right. Right?
That's right. West Coast, East Coast, I mean, and so, but that's a simple way to share something that you just don't know the profound impact that may have. And I got a story about that the other day of one of our members who contacted me and said, I have a friend in this state, states away from us, East Coast, and they said they were going through a hard time, and you had just preached on this topic. And so I said, hey, go to our YouTube page and watch this. Mm-hmm. And now that person's watching, and they're like, wow, that really helped me. And so you never know the ways those things are going to help.
So we've talked about worshiping online. We've talked about staying connected to life groups online. We've talked about serving online. One more aspect of this that I was thinking about was, what about how do we kind of make sure that we maintain our own personal spiritual disciplines? Mm-hmm. I don't know about you, but it's almost like when COVID happened, like time kind of stood still.
Right.
A lot of us were working from home,
yeah.
or and the days kind of dragged together. And so I don't know about you, but like the temptation for me was like do a lot of binge watching and catch up on some Netflix.
Yeah.
And so between the stress and the anxiety that comes from COVID,
right,
and some of the isolation that comes from COVID, I would imagine it would probably be easy to sort of like, mm-hmm. well, I can read the Bible tomorrow. I mean, mm-hmm. I got all week. It's not like I'm going anywhere.
Right.
What do you think about that?
I think a lot of what we said would apply to that. It's a discipline thing. Build that routine. Find those spots to read, pray. Practice that discipline of, okay, I'm going to read. Here's my plan. If you fail to plan, you're gonna fail in your plans. You have to plan those things. And so to build that regular rhythm again, because we're habit people, we're rhythm people. We wake up pretty much the same time every day. We go to bed the same time every day. We get our coffee in the morning at the same time. Insert those things in that discipline, I think, is the key thing there. So, yeah. So good. What else would you encourage? Kind of at the end of every episode, we give kind of one takeaway statement. So what's your one takeaway today for our listeners?
I've heard it said, and this applies to a lot of situations, but sometimes people say, you're going to get out of this what you put into it. Mm. If you're worshiping from home long term, this is going to be a time where you're going to have to put a little more effort into staying connected to the body. And what I would say is that extra bit of effort that mm-hmm. you do to stay connected to your body, to the body of Christ over social distancing, is well worth it.
Yeah, good. And I think my one takeaway is simply this: don't give up on God, and don't give up on the church during this time. We are in, again, I know unprecedented has been used in the media a lot, but we're in times right now that we in this generation haven't been in.
Right.
And we're dealing with things right now we haven't had to deal with before. This is a culture that's really turned like a speedboat in a lot of ways on many different things. So don't give up on God. Don't give up on your church. Whether you're a member of our church or you're listening and you're a member of another church, I guarantee they're trying to do the best they can, to minister to now two groups. And we've talked about this in our staff of, there's the people we see that we can minister to, and then there's the people we don't see that are online. And we don't want to just minister to the people in front of us.
Right.
We want to minister to the folks that we can't see. We know they're there or engaged, but we're having to learn how to do that.
Right.
So we've never had to do that, and so don't give up on God during this time. Don't give up on the church that you're a part of, I think is my big takeaway in thinking of this. So we want to thank you for joining us today on our podcast, and we invite you to join us in person if you can. I know we've talked a lot today about worshiping from a distance, but if you are able to make it in person, we have 2 worship services on Sunday morning at 9 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. where we are practicing social distancing here in our worship center. And so we encourage you, if you can make those services in person, to do so. If you need to watch online, or as Pastor Matt said, maybe you're a worker who works Sunday mornings and you want to catch up later, you can watch live on Sunday mornings at 9 and 10:30 a.m. at our Heights Facebook page and our Heights YouTube page, or you can watch those replays of those services on our Heights YouTube page at any time. And so we encourage you to do that as well. While you're there at the YouTube page, go on and hit the subscribe button, and that way all of the updated content will be able to be fresh for you when you come to the page. And we want to thank you so much for joining us, listening, sharing this episode and any previous episodes with your friends. And until next time, we wish you the best, and God bless.